Dr. Myra Vasquez pressed her palm against the cool viewport of the research vessel Meridian, watching the sleek alien ship approach through the star-speckled void. After 15 years studying xenolinguistics, she was finally witnessing humanity's first contact with the species they'd come to know as the Catherians. The elegant vessel moved with fluid grace, its bioluminescent hull pulsing in patterns that suggested intelligence rather than mere decoration. "Nervous, Doc?" asked Lieutenant Torres, joining her at the observation deck. The young communications officer wore the same expression of awe that had been plastered on everyone's face since the alien ship had responded to their hails 3 days ago. "Excited," Mira corrected, adjusting the sleek silver device at her throat. The Babel Protocol. Translator represented the pinnacle of human linguistic technology, capable of real-time interpretation of any structured language. She'd helped develop its core algorithms, building on centuries of comparative linguistics and artificial intelligence research. "This is what we've trained for our entire careers." The Meridian's captain, a steady woman named Reeves, had specifically requested Myra for this mission. Her work on pre-contact linguistic preparation had earned recognition throughout the fleet, and her translator modifications had been adopted as standard protocol. Everything depended on perfect communication. During these crucial first moments, the alien ship settled into a synchronized orbit, its bioluminescent patterns shifting to what the computer analyzed as peaceful intentions. Within hours, the first shuttle would dock, carrying the Catherian delegation. Mira had spent weeks studying the fragments of their language intercepted from their communications, building preliminary translation matrices that would allow the Babel protocol to function. "Incoming transmission from the Catherian vessel," Torres announced, her voice tight with excitement. Mira hurried to the communications center, where Captain Reeves waited with the senior staff. The view screen flickered to life, revealing 3 figures that took Myra's breath away. The Catherians were humanoid, but ethereally beautiful, with luminescent skin that shifted between pale gold and deep amber. Their leader, distinguished by intricate patterns etched into his skin, stepped forward. "Keth Morin Valathis Naren Duval," he spoke, his voice carrying musical undertones that made Myra's translator hum with activity. The device rendered his words. In crisp English, "We greet you with honor and peaceful intentions." Myra smiled, relief flooding through her. The preliminary language work was holding. She activated her own translator and carefully spoke the formal response she'd prepared. "Humanity welcomes you with respect and friendship. We are honored by your presence." What should have been a moment of triumph became instant horror as her translator converted her words into Catherian. The alien leader's luminescent skin flared bright crimson, and his companions stepped back in what appeared to be shock. Urgent, musical voices erupted from their group, their translator devices struggling to keep pace. "The human female declares her intent to bond with our eldest prince," came the translation. "She offers herself in this sacred marriage rite before witnesses." Captain Reeves shot Mira a look of pure alarm. "Doctor, what exactly did you just say?" Mira's hands flew to her throat, checking the device's settings. Everything appeared normal, but the damage was done. The Catherian delegation was speaking rapidly among themselves, their bioluminescent patterns shifting through what her xenobiology training suggested were states of high agitation. "I said we welcome them with respect," Myra whispered, her voice barely audible, the standard first contact greeting. There must be some error in the cultural context algorithms. The lead Catherian, whom they now realized must be some form of royalty, stepped forward again. His skin had settled into deep purple hues that suggested confusion rather than anger. "Nalathis Keth Viren Maldiveris?" he asked, his musical voice tinged with what sounded like hope. The translator rendered his words with devastating clarity. "Does the human female truly wish to join her life essence with mine in the eternal bond?" "Oh God," Myra breathed, realizing the full scope of the disaster. Somehow her translator had interpreted the standard diplomatic greeting as a marriage proposal to what appeared to be alien royalty. The first words between their species, the foundation upon which all future relations would be built, had been catastrophically wrong. The Cytherian prince was still waiting for her answer, his luminescent skin shifting through hopeful golden hues. Behind him, his companions watched with expressions that suggested this was a moment of tremendous significance. 3 days of careful preparation, 15 years of linguistic study, and humanity's first impression on an alien species, all destroyed by a translation error that had somehow turned diplomacy into an accidental wedding proposal. Captain Jackson Cross had faced down insurgents on 3 different worlds, survived the siege of Kepler Station, and earned his battlefield commission through acts of valor that still made other officers shake their heads in amazement. But none of that had prepared him for the diplomatic nightmare unfolding in the Meridian's conference room. "Let me handle this," he told Dr. Vasquez quietly, stepping forward with the confidence that had carried him through countless dangerous situations. His Babel protocol translator gleamed against his military uniform, standard issue for all senior staff during first contact protocols. The Cytherian prince, whose skin was still cycling through confused golden patterns, turned his attention to Jackson. The other 2 Cytherians flanked their leader, their own bioluminescent displays suggesting heightened alertness. Clearly, they understood the gravity of the situation, even if the humans were still scrambling to comprehend it. Jackson activated his translator and spoke in the measured tones he'd learned during his diplomatic training courses. "Please forgive Dr. Vasquez. There has been a misunderstanding with our translation technology. We request patience while we resolve this error." The translator hummed for a moment, processing his words through the same corrupted algorithms that had created the initial disaster. When the Cytherian prince received the translation, his golden luminescence immediately flared to brilliant white, then shifted rapidly to deep, aggressive crimson. "Thalavus Corundalid Marintak," the prince declared, his musical voice taking on harder, more martial tones. His companions immediately moved into flanking positions, their hands moving to what appeared to be ceremonial weapons at their sides. Jackson's blood ran cold as his translator rendered the prince's words. "The human warrior challenges me to honorable combat for the female's hand." No, that's not what I meant," Jackson said quickly. But the damage was already spreading. Captain Reeves grabbed his arm, but he pressed on, trying to clarify. "I was simply requesting understanding between our peoples." The translator processed his desperate clarification and somehow made everything worse. "The human warrior insists on immediate combat to prove his worthiness." The Cytherian prince's skin was now blazing scarlet, patterns of white and silver racing across his luminescent flesh in what any xenobiologist would recognize as extreme agitation. He spoke rapidly to his companions, who responded with their own flashing displays of what appeared to be combat readiness. "Calarthus Virin Morden Talak," the prince announced formally, and Jackson didn't need the translation to know. He just accepted what the Babel protocol had interpreted as a challenge to single combat. "He accepts the duel, Dr. Vasquez whispered, her face pale with horror. "Jackson, what have you done?" "The same thing you did," he replied grimly, watching as the Cytherians began what appeared to be ritual preparations. "I tried to fix it." The lead Cytherian was now speaking in rapid, formal phrases that the translator was rendering as combat protocols. Something about honor weapons, sacred ground, and the winner claiming the right to the offered female. The 2 other Cytherians were pulling ornate objects from their ceremonial pouches, assembling what looked disturbingly like actual weapons. Captain Reeves stepped forward, her own translator active. "As commanding officer of this vessel, I must intervene. There will be no combat aboard my ship." The translator converted her authoritative statement into something that sent all three Cytherians into what appeared to be apoplectic shock. Their bioluminescent displays erupted in rapid, angry patterns that hurt to look at directly. "She denies the warrior's right to honorable combat," came the translation of their agitated responses. "She breaks the sacred laws of challenge bond. This is an insult beyond forgiveness." Jackson realized with growing dread that every attempt to resolve the situation was only making it worse. The Babel Protocol's translation matrix had somehow become corrupted in a way that was systematically destroying any chance of peaceful resolution. His warrior's instincts told him to fight his way out, but his tactical mind recognized that they were vastly outnumbered and in unknown territory. The Cytherian prince drew himself up to his full height, his skin now displaying patterns that seemed to pulse with barely contained fury. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "Morthus Callardoneth Viren Tal, Salmaren Darthic Velen Mor." The translation hit the humans like a physical blow. The challenge stands by sacred law. Prepare for combat or face the consequences of cowardice. Jackson met the alien prince's luminous gaze, seeing his own reflection in those otherworldly eyes. 15 years of military service had taught him to recognize when diplomatic solutions had failed and only force remained. But this wasn't a battlefield where courage and training could overcome impossible odds. This was first contact with an alien species, and his attempts to salvage Dr. Vasquez's translation error had instead escalated a misunderstanding into what appeared to be an honor duel with potentially deadly consequences. Counselor Tessa Rain felt the waves of panic and confusion radiating from her human colleagues before she even entered the conference room. As the Meridian's chief diplomatic psychologist and one of the rare humans born with empathic abilities, she'd been called to countless crisis situations. But the emotional turbulence surrounding this first contact scenario was unlike anything she'd experienced. "Everyone needs to step back and breathe," she announced calmly, her training taking over as she assessed the situation. The Cytherians were displaying what appeared to be aggressive bioluminescent patterns, while Captain Reeves looked ready to call for security and Dr. Vasquez appeared on the verge of a panic attack. Her empathic senses could feel the aliens' emotions, too, though they were strange and filtered through non-human consciousness. Confusion, honor-bound determination, and something that felt almost like excitement were radiating from the Cytherian prince. His companions projected watchful alertness and what seemed to be anticipation. "Counselor Rain, thank God, Captain," Reeves said. "Maybe you can sort out this translator malfunction before someone gets hurt." Tessa activated her own Babel protocol device and extended her empathic abilities toward the Cytherian delegation. Her gift allowed her to create emotional bridges between species, helping to establish understanding that transcended language barriers. She'd successfully mediated disputes between humans and the crystalline hegemony, the aquatic collective, and even the enigmatic void dancers. Surely she could calm this situation. "Honored visitors," she began, projecting feelings of peace and understanding while speaking carefully chosen words. "Please allow me to create a bridge of mutual comprehension between our peoples. I offer my mind as a conduit for true understanding." The Babel Protocol processed her diplomatic overture, and Tessa immediately knew something was catastrophically wrong. The Cytherian prince's bioluminescent patterns flared to brilliant white, then shifted to deep purple, shot through with veins of angry red. His companions stepped back in what appeared to be shock and horror. "Vorthamith Salander Calanthus," the prince declared, his musical voice now carrying undertones of revulsion and fear. Tessa's heart sank as her translator rendered his words. "The human witch attempts to invade our minds with her dark sorcery." "No, that's not what I meant," she said desperately, but her empathic abilities were already detecting the shift in the alien's emotional state. Fear and anger were replacing confusion, and something that felt disturbingly like preparations for violence. The Catherian prince spoke rapidly to his companions, and Tessa's enhanced senses picked up what felt like military commands. Her translator confirmed her worst fears. Prepare the mind shields. The humans use psychic warfare. This is an act of aggression against the sovereignty of our thoughts. Counselor, what's happening? Captain Reeves demanded, but Tessa barely heard her. The emotional feedback from the Catherians was overwhelming her empathic defenses. Their fear of mental invasion was so intense, it was creating a psychic echo that made her own abilities unstable. In desperation, she tried to project calming emotions directly, hoping to bypass the corrupted translator entirely. It was a technique she'd used successfully in emergency situations, but something went wrong. The emotional bridge she attempted to create was interpreted by the Catherian prince as a full-scale psychic assault. Corvethmalin Dar the Svorthik, he shouted, his skin now blazing with patterns that hurt to look at directly. His companions were pulling out devices that looked suspiciously like weapons, their own bioluminescent displays cycling through what appeared to be combat readiness patterns. The translation hit Tessa like a physical blow. The mind-rich attacks are sacred. Thoughts. This is an act of war. The emotional backlash from the aliens' terror and rage was overwhelming her empathic shields. She could feel their absolute conviction that she was some kind of hostile telepath attempting to control their minds. Worse, her own emotional distress was creating feedback loops that were making her abilities even more erratic. Everyone remained calm, she tried to say, but the words came out wrong as her translator, influenced by her unstable empathic state, converted them into something that sounded like a psychic command. The Catherian prince raised one of his ceremonial weapons, its crystalline structure beginning to glow with internal energy. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute authority and barely controlled fury. Salmaran Kethvorthik Dalithmer, Neventhis Koron Malin Kolar Vex. Even through her distress, Tessa understood the translation with perfect, horrible clarity. The humans have revealed themselves as hostile mind controllers. We will defend ourselves against this psychic aggression with lethal force. She realized with growing horror that her attempt to use her empathic abilities to calm the situation had been interpreted as exactly the kind of mental invasion the Catherians seemed to fear most. Every human attempt to resolve the crisis had only made it worse. And now the aliens were preparing for what they believed was necessary self-defense against psychic warfare. The emotional resonance in the room was becoming unbearable, a chaotic mixture of human panic and alien determination that threatened to overwhelm her entirely. Chief Engineer Omar Blackwood burst through the conference room doors just as the Catherian weapons began to charge with ominous energy. His diagnostic scanner was beeping frantically, displaying readouts that confirmed his worst suspicions about the Babel protocol malfunction. Everyone stop talking, he shouted, his gravelly voice cutting through the chaos. The emergency engineering alert that had dragged him from the engine room 3 decks down was now making perfect, terrifying sense. The Catherians turned there, luminous gazes toward him, weapons still raised, but hesitating at this new development. Omar could see the energy building in their crystalline devices, but his engineer's mind was focused on the more immediate problem. The Babel protocol translators weren't just malfunctioning, they were actively sabotaging every attempt at communication. Captain, we need to shut down all translation devices immediately, he said, pulling out his scanner and pointing it at the nearest Catherian. The quantum resonance from their ship is creating interference patterns in our linguistic processors. Captain. Reeves looked at him like he'd lost his mind. Omar, If we shut down the translators, we can't communicate at all. Right now, we're communicating ourselves into a war, he replied grimly, his scanner detecting massive quantum fluctuations emanating from the alien vessel. Their technology operates on quantum entanglement principles that are creating feedback loops in our translation matrices. Every word we speak is being processed through corrupted algorithms. Dr. Vasquez stepped forward, her face pale but determined. Omar, can you fix it? The chief engineer studied his readings, his mind racing through possible solutions. The Cytherian ship's quantum signature was unlike anything in human databases. Its energy patterns creating interference that was systematically corrupting the Babel protocol's language processing cores. But there might be a way to adapt their technology to compensate. Maybe, he said, but it would require interfacing directly with their quantum systems. I'd need to create a bridge between our technology and theirs. The Cytherian prince, apparently, understanding the urgency if not the words, spoke in rapid musical phrases. His translator rendered the words as, "The human seeks to invade our ship's sacred mind core." "No," Omar said quickly, then caught himself before the translation could make things worse. Instead, he pulled out a specialized interface cable and held it up, speaking directly to his scanner rather than the Babel protocol. "Computer, analyze Cytherian quantum signatures and display mathematical correlations." The scanner projected a holographic display of energy patterns and mathematical equations. To Omar's relief, the Cytherians immediately focused on the display rather than his words. Mathematics, it seemed, was a universal language that their ship's interference couldn't corrupt. Working quickly, Omar began modifying the equations, showing how their quantum signatures were creating destructive interference with human translation technology. The Cytherian prince studied the display intently, his bioluminescent patterns shifting from aggressive red to thoughtful blue-green. One of the Cytherian companions produced a device of their own, projecting complementary equations that showed their understanding of the problem. Omar felt a surge of hope as he realized they were engaged in genuine technical communication for the first time since the crisis began. "Captain," he said carefully, "I need permission to attempt a direct quantum interface with their systems. It's dangerous, but it might be the only way to establish clean communication channels." The risk was enormous. Interfacing human technology with unknown alien quantum systems could result in anything from system crashes to catastrophic feedback loops. But the alternative was watching first contact dissolve into violence based entirely on translation errors. Cytherian prince seemed to understand the gravity of Omar's proposal. He spoke to his companions in rapid musical phrases, then approached the holographic display. Using his own device, he projected what appeared to be schematics of their ship's quantum communication systems. Omar studied the alien designs, his engineer's mind racing to understand technology that operated on principles human science was only beginning to grasp. But the mathematical relationships were becoming clear. If he could create a quantum bridge between their systems, it might be possible to establish communication channels that bypassed the corrupted Babel protocol entirely. "I'll need to link my neural interface directly to their quantum matrix," he told Captain Reeves. "If it works, we'll have clean translations. If it DOESN, single quotes T. He didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone understood that failure could mean anything from permanent brain damage to being trapped in an alien quantum system. But as the Cytherian weapons continued to charge and the situation spiraled toward disaster, Omar realized it was their only hope. The Cytherian prince extended one of his luminous hands toward Omar, and the engineer understood was an offer to attempt the dangerous interface. Two species' first contact hung in the balance, dependent on whether human and alien technology could find common ground in the quantum realm. Ambassador Helena Thorne materialized in the Meridian's transporter, Bay exactly 18 minutes after receiving the emergency diplomatic alert. Her decades of experience in interstellar relations had taught her to recognize the signs of a first contact crisis. But the preliminary reports she'd received during transport suggested something far worse than the usual cultural misunderstandings. "Ambassador, thank God you're here," Captain Reeves said, meeting her at the transporter pad. "The situation is completely out of control." Helena took in the captain's haggard appearance and the tension radiating from the escort detail. Briefing. Now, as they hurried through the ship's corridors, Captain Reeves quickly outlined the cascade of disasters. The accidental marriage proposal, the honor duel challenge, the psychic warfare accusations, and now the desperate attempt to create a quantum communication bridge between species. "Where are they now?" Helena asked, her diplomatic mind already formulating possible solutions. "Engineering Bay 7. Chief Blackwood is attempting the interface as we speak." They arrived to find a scene that would have been impossible to imagine just hours earlier during routine first contact preparations. Omar Blackwood sat in the center of a complex array of human and Cytherian technology, neural interface cables, connecting his head to devices that pulsed with alien energy patterns. The Cytherian prince stood beside him, one luminous hand resting on what appeared to be a quantum resonance amplifier. Dr. Vasquez, Captain Cross, and Counselor Rain stood at monitoring stations, their faces reflecting varying degrees of hope and terror. The Cytherian companions flanked their prince, their weapons lowered but still at ready. "Status report," Helena commanded. "The quantum bridge is stabilizing," Dr. Vasquez replied, her eyes fixed on scrolling data. "Omar's neural patterns are synchronizing with their communication matrix." Suddenly, Omar's eyes snapped open, glowing with faint traces of the same luminescence that characterized Cytherian skin. When he spoke, his voice carried harmonics that hadn't been there before. "Communication channels established," he announced, his words somehow carrying both human and Cytherian linguistic patterns simultaneously. "Translation errors identified and corrected." The Cytherian prince stepped forward, and when he spoke, his words came through clearly, without the distortion that had plagued every previous exchange. "Humans of the vessel Meridian," he said, his musical voice now perfectly comprehensible, "we greet you with peaceful intentions and regret the misunderstandings that have occurred." Helena felt the tension in the room shift as clear communication was finally established. "Your Highness, I am Ambassador Helena Thorne. On behalf of humanity, I apologize for the technological failures that created this crisis." The prince's bioluminescent patterns shifted to what she now understood were expressions of relief and amusement. "The fault lies with neither species. Ambassador, our quantum communication systems created unforeseen interference with your translation technology. We were as confused by your apparent proposals and challenges as you were by our responses." Dr. Vasquez stepped forward, her face flushed with embarrassment. "Then you weren't actually expecting me to marry you?" The prince's luminescence brightened in what was clearly laughter. "Honored linguist, your actual words were a beautifully formal greeting that showed deep respect for our customs. The marriage proposal existed only in your translator's corrupted processing." Captain Cross looked equally relieved. "And the honor duel?" "You were attempting to apologize and request patience," the prince replied. "Admirable diplomacy that our weapons master here found quite impressive." He gestured to one of his companions, whose patterns were displaying what Helena recognized as friendly amusement. Counselor Rain, still pale from her empathic ordeal, asked hesitantly, "What? About the accusations of psychic warfare?" "Your attempt to create emotional understanding was perceived as a gift," the prince explained gently. "Among our people, sharing one's emotional resonance is considered a profound honor. The translator's interpretation of invasion was the opposite of your actual intent." Helene watched as the crisis dissolved into mutual understanding and even friendship. The Cytherian delegation was genuinely interested in establishing peaceful relations, and the humans' attempts to resolve each misunderstanding had actually demonstrated exactly the qualities the aliens valued most: respect, courage, empathy, and ingenuity. "Chief Blackwood," she said, "your quantum bridge solution may have just revolutionized interstellar communication." Omar, still connected to the alien systems, nodded wearily. "The Cytherians have agreed to share their quantum resonance technology. Combined with our Babel protocols, we should be able to create universal translators that can adapt to any species communication methods." The Cytherian prince's patterns shifted to formal diplomatic configurations. "Ambassador Thorm, we propose a permanent cultural and technological exchange. Your species has shown remarkable adaptability and determination in the face of adversity." Helena smiled, feeling the satisfaction that came with turning potential disaster into diplomatic triumph. "Your Highness, humanity would be honored to begin a new era of cooperation between our peoples." As the two species began planning their future together, she reflected that the greatest diplomatic successes often emerged from the ashes of the most spectacular failures.